So let's go ahead and take a minute and talk a little bit about some changes in the syllabus. So we are scheduled to discuss chapter 5, right? This week and perhaps next week, because that's how things typically roll. However, as I looked at the syllabus, I was talking to Luz about this. I looked at the syllabus. We were actually supposed to do something else today. We were supposed to do some corpus work, which is fine. We can push this forward. And I moved some other things around for the next couple of weeks. So I hope everybody's okay with all of that. And that said, please let's make sure that we take a look at the syllabus. I'll certainly do that, but also you all take a look at the syllabus before you plan the next stages, so we don't, because there are some new things that got added, including some readings. That's one. The other thing I want to mention is I have just created an assignment, which you will find under assignments. So if you see if you can take a minute to take a look at it. So this assignment is called midterm-ish. Let's see if you can find it.
I have it.
Okay, Nadia has it. Luz and Chelsea, you have it. It is due on the 22nd. What this assignment entails is you kind of summarizing all the things that you have gone through in the last several weeks, but also watching a few videos. And one of the reasons for that is I will actually not be here next week. I will do my best to run the class from wherever I am, but sometimes Wi-Fi happens. So, but Wi-Fi problems happen. So I have this backup plan that has to do with this assignment. So take a minute and read the assignment. So that you understand what all I'm asking you to do. Okay, so everybody clear what we're doing? So somebody please help us all make sure that we're all on the same page. What are we doing? What are you doing? As the case might be.
We're making a video answering some of the questions in the chapter with information from the chapter.
And information from a video. From some videos, right? So there's 3 lectures up here, Jubina Butalebi, Frangianis, and Viorica Marian. So you'll watch these, and some of them, well, they're all accessible. One is a little less accessible than like to kind of everyday person in the street. But with your knowledge of literature at this point, you should be able to understand what's going on. There's lots of realia-related things. There's stuff on the back, so you will see what is being talked about. So there's 3 roughly corresponding to each of your chapters under discussion. So you're watching this, you are revisiting your chapters, and then you kind of connecting the 2. And so if you recall, one of the things that you have to do for this class is create a digital product. This is your first step in creating a digital product. Kind of making sure that you can talk about this. And important, please limit yourself. Don't go into long lecture. These people go into long lectures, but I'm not asking for a long lecture. I'm asking for kind of summary of information with some important visuals, right? So that's kind of, you don't have to create any visuals per se. Your visuals ought to come out of what people are already doing. So take a screenshot. Okay? Everybody's clear on this part? So this will be due on the 22nd, which is the day before we meet the time after this one. I mean, time after, in 2 weeks. So I suggest start listening, start thinking, start reviewing chapters so you can figure out how to talk about this quickly but also informatively. Questions about this? Everybody's good with this? No questions, no problems? Obviously, if questions arise, I will be available, but, you know. Yep, Chelsea, you got a question? Nope, all good?
No, I was just making notes and
Yeah.
just, when
Yeah.
we create the video,
Yeah.
do you want more like us just talking to the video, or do you want like a PowerPoint that kind of like
So,
shows what we're talking about?
right, so you want to be talking, but since you have to have the screenshots that supports whatever it is you're saying, you probably want to have some kind of a PowerPoint flowing in the back. Okay? Yeah, we're good with this? Luz, questions?
No, not really. I was just looking over the instructions again.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, you have plenty of time, so, you know. If anything goes wrong with any of the links, please let me know. But these links, I tried them out 3 times today, so hopefully they will work just fine. Okay. All right. So with that said, I think it's a good time to start jumping into the story you want to tell us, Luz, because you have things to talk about.
Yes.
Yep. So today's day on chapter 4, right? I mean 5. Sorry. Today's chapter 5.
Yes, today's chapter 5. Can you guys remind me how to share my screen?
Yes. So you go to the purple arrows at the very bottom at the right, and then should say something like share application or something, or window.
Oh, share content. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
Share content. Something of that sort.
Wait. So it's presenters and moderators may share content.
Oh, I have to do this. Hold on. I have to once
Says
again
nothing
make.
is shared.
Yes, I have to once again make you a presenter because because of course I do. Hold on. Yes, everybody has to be made presenters. Presenter, and then Luz make a presenter. Okay, great.
Alright, so share application screen. Alright, can you guys see that?
Not yet.
What is it? Not yet?
Not yet. I suspect it's coming. Yeah, here it is.
Alright. Let's see.
Yeah.
Alright. Oops. Can you guys see it full screen or no?
Yes, we can see the big screen. Bilingualism, a typical development, chapter 5. Yes, I see this. Oh, we see this, I think. Yeah.
Alright, let me get myself organized here. Because it's weird because I can't see anything else now.
Yeah, I know. It's such a.
If it helps, I can only see you like setting a presenter view.
Yeah.
But I don't know if when you click, it's gonna show you moving it.
Do you guys see the big one now? Or no?
Oh
Yes,
yeah, I
yes,
see it.
Now you see the.
You just see the chapter 5, the whole full screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, is it just Nadia, myself, and Chelsea?
For
And
now
you?
it is, yes. So Mary is coming a little late. She's in an appointment. She asked, if, she apologized for that. It is what it is, right? And I don't know what's happening with Manelli, so we'll see. Yeah. For now, there's 3.
Okay, I only asked because there's certain sections that I already know who's assigned to them.
Yep.
So if we get to them and they're not here, then we'll figure it
Then
out.
we'll just skip and then we'll revisit this conversation next week or whatever it is.
Okay, so my chapter was chapter 5, bilingualism and atypical development. 5.1 was the same subsection. So a couple of old beliefs that they were challenging. Bilingualism was mistakenly thought to cause delays in language or cognitive development, especially individuals with disorders. However, the chapter does a good job at showing us that bilingualism does not introduce additional challenges, even in cases of atypical development like dyslexia, autism, or aphasia, which is some of the things they talk about here. One of the things they find critical is how we evaluate bilinguals. Um, they say that it's important to move away from isolating their language skills and instead adopt a holistic approach, kind of considering a person or a child's entire linguistic background, how and when they acquired each language. Um, and they do a lot of talking about the difference in a simultaneous bilingual, who is someone who learned two languages from birth, and how they may present differently than a consecutive bilingual who learned a second language later on.
Okay.
So some tools. Hello.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I can't see anyone. So
Yeah, no,
if I hear something,
No,
okay.
so I had to move away, so because I see Manelli had joined and I wanted to make sure that she had the presenting rights. Okay, keep going.
Okay, no worries. So some tools for language history assessment that they talked about in this chapter were two examples that were cited in the book was the bilingual language experience calculator and the Alberta Language and Development Questionnaire. Both of these tools are used to gather detailed information about a bilingual's exposure and their use of languages. And doing so kind of just supports a more accurate diagnosis of English difficulties.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right here. Hold on. Let's stop for just a second. So all the people in the room, especially those who've worked with bilingual children or bilingual individuals in like educational settings, are you familiar with these questionnaires and calculators? Immediate question arises. Have you ever seen these calculators or these questionnaires? Maya's like, absolutely not, but I'm not in the classroom, she says. Okay, how about you, Luz and Chelsea?
I think I've heard of the Alberta language questionnaire, maybe.
But is it all? But
I had not heard of any of these, but actually I have a link on the other one so we can look at what it actually looks like.
That's wonderful. So I was just curious whether you had heard of these and Manila says that she'd heard of this, but does that mean that it is not being implemented in your educational setting?
Not necessarily.
No, well, I mean, if you've never heard of it, maybe. Yeah, that's right. Not necessarily. Maybe somebody else is doing it, but certainly not you, the bilingual teacher. All right, keep going.
I feel like the speech pathologists will be the ones to run these tests from my experiences.
Got it.
Yeah, or the kids are already qualified or don't meet the criteria, but we never get like the baseline assessments like this.
Yeah, so this is an important part because as we will look at later, bilingual language experience calculator is really kind of an extended version of home language survey. It's very extended. So
that's actually the one that I'm familiar with, which tells us if we even have to test our kid or not.
Right. That's an interesting point to be asking. Okay, keep going.
So this was the link. Does the link even work? Oh, it does work. Great. Okay. So can you guys still see that or no?
We only see the original version. Like if it went somewhere, we can't see
hold
it.
on. So I clicked the link just in case this is what the Alberta.
There you go. Yeah.
Language and development questionnaire looks like. It kind of just has a lot of background information. It is basically a set of questions that the family answers. It consists of parent-reported questionnaires used by speech and language pathologists, which was what Manelli was saying. Usually, sometimes different departments in the school will handle it. It helps differentiate between children with the typical development and those who may have a language disorder by gathering information on early milestones, etc. So I thought it was cool to actually see what the questionnaire looked like. Hold on, let me stop sharing this and go back. Wait, what do you guys see right now?
You.
Oh, me? Cool. Hold up. Let me exit this. Let me share.
Second question on
the screen.
So hold on, Luz, there's a question.
And
Yeah,
then-
go ahead.
The
Okay.
the second question on that questionnaire, the parents would be answering that?
What was the second question? Can you please remind us?
It says, how old was your child when he/she first spoke a word?
Yes, that's a parental.
And then it has the months. So less than 15 months, 16 to 24 months, or greater than 25 months.
So do you have concerns about this question?
Yeah, babble.
Go ahead, tell us.
Parents don't know what a word is when their child is learning early language. So words like dada and mama, they're not words. So if they answer when they started using those words, it could skew the
data.
Skews the data.
Yeah.
I know my mother tells me all the time my first words were "oh wow," and I don't know. That's like an exclamation. It's not.
I mean, it is a word, but maybe
like,
you were just doing "oh wow wow wow," right? Maybe you were just babbling.
I was
right.
at a Wiggles concert, so I was wowing.
Well, everybody at the Wiggles concert wows, except for people who want to commit things.
So I think about
the
babble. If a parent is answering that, they're
So the point is taken.
Yeah.
So if the child is babbling and the parents think the caregiver, the relevant caregiver, thinks that the child is actually producing words, right? So this skews the data. So let's hope that in the overall universe, this gets a wash with statistics. Maybe, right? But point is well taken. Yeah. No, you're right.
I mean, it also, if it helps, I mean, I don't know if it makes a real difference, but it also says, like, right under that, in that same question, examples of the child's first words with translation.
Yeah.
I guess you have to, like, prove that you knew it was a word.
Yeah. That's one of the things that happens. People require some sort of evidence that you have to write this down, what kind of word that was. And maybe if it's just dada or mama, they just, but maybe it's duck and truck, then pointing at the duck or truck, then we now look at the actual word. Yeah. All right, cool.
Right, let me reshare this. Can you guys see it again?
Not yet. We just want to hear the baby babbling. It seems like the right time to talk about it. All right.
Okay, are you guys on the Alberta?
Yes.
The Alberta link thing?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So next one, the first connection that I made from this chapter to one of the other texts was the text called Language Policy in the United States, A History of Cultural Genocide. One of the key aspects of this chapter that's kind of reiterated over and over again is the false assumptions that bilingualism causes language disorders or developmental disorders or developmental delays. This false assumption often led to bilingualism being seen in a negative light rather than a positive one. But the chapter also focuses on embracing bilingualism as a tool for empowerment. This connects to the arguments made in Hernandez Chavez's 1994 A History of Cultural Genocide article, where he argues that U.S. language policy has historically acted as cultural genocide by using schools to suppress indigenous and minority languages in favor of English. In his article, he urges educators to reject deficit views of bilingualism and instead support bilingual education that values and protects students' native languages as a civil rights issue, which, just like in chapter 5, explains that bilingualism is not a negative thing and is not to blame for things like atypical development.
So can we stop for a second? And I don't know if now is the time for this, or maybe you can tell us, or you can tell me, oh, Helen, wait, and we'll revisit this conversation later. But like, I'm interested in having you all unpack the idea of language policy being cultural genocide more generally. Like, what are those, like, why? I mean, yes, suppression of culture, we get that, but genocide seems like a really strong term. So I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm saying it feels like it needs to be unpacked. It feels like it's not the same to just say, okay, we need to respect people's languages. Bilingualism does not result in a negative, whatever, in deficits. But this is much more loaded terminology. So is now a good time for this, or do you want to come back to this point?
whatever you guys prefer.
That's good then.
Now
You
it's
don't
good.
have
Let's
to
hear
s-
it. Let's hear it. So can you remind us, or can you kind of throw in some definitions maybe, or something that Hernandez Chavez actually articulates as as evidence or as a demonstration of genocide, cultural genocide?
Wait, was that question to me? Sorry,
Yes,
I can't
yes.
see anything but my presentation.
Yes,
Let me
well,
stop sharing this.
Yes.
Can I ask, what was the actual policy that he says it's a form of cultural genocide?
Yeah. So he says
I don't
that-
think he was talking about just one singular one. It's just
Yeah.
the
Yeah, he says that
having
U.S. language policy more
policy.
generally. Yeah, U.S. language policy more generally. So this kind of makes us stop and think about what U.S. language policy is. Like, what is the general language policy in this country?
I thought we really didn't have any, and this is why Trump wants to make English the official language in the U.S. I don't know, maybe wrong.
We definitely did. We definitely had a policy of Anglicism.
I mean, we still do, right? It's not
Yeah.
did. Yeah, we
Well,
Does
okay. Hold up, Manila.
now it's even more in law, of course, with the establishment of English as the national language of the United States. But when we're talking about this language policy, we're talking earlier in America's history with the Indian schools, as they were called, where they
so
would
residential schools. Yeah.
they would take children from families and put them into these schools, kind of mandatory, compulsory education in English language and American culture to that effect.
Well, so like, let's define American culture, right? Because these people are already on the continent, so we have to be careful with that, right?
Yeah.
So the culture of this new country, right? Like
New
U.S.
English
culture.
people.
Yeah.
English
like
culture.
English-centric, like Eurocentric, English-centric culture.
English,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, so that was an actual legit policy. You take kids out of their own linguistic, thanks for that example, you take kids out of their own linguistic spaces and you put them into a space where English only is allowed. So that happened with many residential schools. The latest one closed like in the 70s, man. It's been going on for a long time. Yes, so that's one. But is there any, and so other questions on this point? Manila, I don't know if you knew about that. Yeah, okay, so of course what happened in these schools, as Nadia points out, right, you put the kids in there and you disallow their native language, but you, or any native languages that they might have, but you also disallow any cultural expression, right? So kids come in and they need to have their hair long, for example, you cut their hair immediately. If they need to, for cultural reasons, if they wear clothes, whatever, associated with their communal membership, you take those away immediately, you burn them, and you put them into sort of Eurocentric uniforms and so forth. And lots of, it has to do with various aspects of the culture that people had brought with them as they were shifted, as they were shipped into these schools, right? And the reality, unfortunate reality, is that this move on behalf of the government, both in the U.S. and certainly in Canada and a number of other places, but particularly U.S. and Canada, has resulted in much cultural loss across communities, right? And so, for which people are still kind of paying in many ways. There's a lot of literature on that. So, questions on this point, because that's not the only moment of cultural genocide and cultural linguistic genocide that people talk about, including Hernandez Chavez. That's not the only kind of policy. So, so questions on this part? Everybody clear on this part? Okay. So, was there anything else about linguistic policy? Well, I guess Nadia wants to take the floor on this point. So, is there anything else about language policy in the U.S. that has been argued to be result in general or be, result in cultural genocide? To your knowledge?
I'm not sure if any.
You said in the West?
In the U.S. In the U.S.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure of any specifically aimed at language, other than just lacking government representation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a specific policy, I don't think,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't use native languages in court for law. So I don't know.
Or schools or any other place. So can you use? So that's the point, right? Can you use a language, any languages other than English, in court, in school, in your police station, and so far, right? So forth. Like, do you have linguistic pluralism? Let's call it that in the U.S. structure by policy. Everybody seems to be muted, so hopefully somebody will say something.
I mean, there's certain, I don't know if this would apply, but in certain states, it's not like the court or anything, but certain districts, if they have a certain amount of students speaking another language, they have to provide educational services. It's not like court or like in hospitals or whatever, but does that count? Like, students who are newcomers, they have to by law, like for example in New Britain, if we have a certain amount of students who are Spanish speakers, they have to have a certain amount of services.
They have to have certain amount of they don't actually have to have certain amount of services. What they have to
Bilingual
have,
education?
yeah, so they have to have bilingual
they're
education,
like
yeah.
we're mandated to give them like ESL support to a certain extent
Right.
by law.
Right, but does that have something to do with other languages being legislatively equal or even allowed anywhere in the U.S. sphere? Because what you just cited is that
You're required to teach them English.
you're required to teach them English. That's what you said, right? Which is, what does that do to English?
But okay, so we're required to teach them English, but there has to be a certain level of support in, I don't know. Never mind.
Are you talking about like the service minutes that goes into like newcomers versus like a level 3 or level 2
That
for
was-
English supports? Are you talking about like, so for example, like my school had more than 20 Spanish speakers, so we had to become a designated bilingual school by law, like that's a law. But I don't know if that's part of language policy. Is that what you're talking about?
Sure, that is a language policy. So you are not actually by law becoming a bilingual school. Like, that's not what the law says. The law says in Connecticut, the law says that if it's called
In Connecticut.
yeah, it says that if you have a school where 20 or more children speak a particular language, you have to provide them with bilingual instruction. What that instruction looks like, nobody really says. What that instruction looks like is giving them language support in their L1 and then teaching them English, and then as soon as they know their English, withdrawing the L1. That's what that looks like. That's the law in Connecticut. So this is also a law in several other states, but it is particular law in Connecticut. The Bilingualism Act. That's what it's called, Bilingualism Act. But the real question is, even with this particular act, does it seem that this is respect to these students, let's say, cultural heritage? Or what's, right, like, is this about maintaining their language?
No, it's about getting them English.
Right, that's about getting them English. That's what it is. That's all it is, right? So this is an important part, right? It's all about English. However we get there, it's all about English. And so part of the question becomes like, does the U.S. have a linguistic policy? Absolutely so. Linguistic policy is focused on English. There are a number of different ways of making this happen, one of which is you got a bunch of kids in this classroom or in this school that speak this particular language. It's going to be easier for you to teach English this way versus that way, right? But the idea is, like, the whole notion of linguistic policy in the U.S. is all about English. And you know this because of bilingualism, the Bilingualism Act that we just talked about, but also the fact that everything must be in English, right? Like if your school is currently designated as a bilingual school, does that mean that all the subjects are taught in both languages, Manali? No, not at all, right? Not at all. And everything is taught in English, right? That's sort of the idea. And to Nadia's point, courts are all in English. You can't come in with Cree or with Dakota or even Spanish into court, right? You have like all of the materials have to be in English. And so, any questions on this point? Okay, in the absence of such questions, now hopefully you will see the kind of the road that Hernandez Chavez takes, and lots of people before and after Hernandez Chavez's work, right, that says it doesn't, like it may be a kind of a covert linguicism. Another term for this is linguicism, like racism, right? It may be covert linguistic prejudice, or it may be out in the open linguistic prejudice, but let's make absolutely sure that we know that this country, says the literature, has engaged in cultural genocide because it basically takes languages and their cultures away from people. And that is the linguistic policy. Now, this is what the literature says, right? And so you can see hopefully how this conversation goes. Comments on this point?
I have just kind of mentioned that the U.S. is not the first, not the
Nope.
last, and not the
Nope.
only country
That's
to ever do this.
Exactly. So do you want to tell more about that?
In the UK, there was Welsh schools. What was it called? The Wood. I can't remember the Welsh name for it, but you would wear a wooden placard and be corporally punished at the end of the day for ever speaking Welsh in school. In France, it was much the same. You ever spoke a French dialect, so Piedmont,
Some version of
Piedmontese,
some variety of
Tongue,
yeah.
or Breton, you would get the cow, and that would ostracize you from the community. It would. Yeah. And this was also done in Japan. It was also done in Ireland.
Yeah. So U.S. is nothing special at this point, right? So one of the books that you all have there is by Skutnap Kangas, who's worked in this issue extensively. She passed a couple of years ago. And this is sort of what she reports, right? You see this in Africa, you see this in the Netherlands, you see this, you see this in Sweden, like you see this everywhere, but that, these are effects of linguicism and more broadly defined racism and colonial structures, right? Like lots of things going on here, yeah. But you see this everywhere. So one of the points of note here is that we need to be really, really careful in how we look at policies of the country we are actually living in, but also working with, so we can see how these kind of what other people have called cultural genocidal tendencies show up in our daily lives. Okay?
It's called the Welsh knot in Wales and the symbol, or arwol, the cow.
There you go. Yeah, so it's out there. Yeah, it's out there. U.S. is certainly not the only one, that's for sure. All right, comments on this point? It's like, I never thought about that. Yeah. So these are strong words, but people don't mince words. All right, cool. So given all of that, this is kind of a background of what we might be talking about when we're talking about giving folks access to their own languages, or assuming that they can't have access to their own languages due to their, let's say, disability. So according to Hernandez Chavez, this is all part of the same package, right? Because you just think that only the dominant language reigns, right? Okay. Back to you, Luz.
Yes, one second, let me re-share this. Okay, so the next part was actually also drawing connections to another text. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay. But this one was chapter 4 of Coppola.
Mm-hmm.
Coppola's Literacy for All. That text argues that all students engage in meaningful literacy, even when it doesn't align with school norms, which we were just talking about. Both texts call for teaching practices that honor students' home languages and reject deficit-based thinking. I mean, never mind. Okay, so that was pretty much the 5.1. This is a chance for the 5.1 mini presentation, but according to what I have written down, no one has 5.1.
Well,
I don't know if you just want me to.
then go ahead and plow through it.
Alright, so, sorry. Go ahead, Manila.
Oh, I have 5.2.
No, but we haven't.
Oh, we're not yet.
Not there yet.
Oh, you're not there yet?
No.
Okay.
No, we were just starting 5.2. Don't worry, I have your slide with your name on and everything.
I'm gonna get up for a second because I need to let Mary be the presenter, but keep going. She seems to have just joined. Go ahead.
Alright, so 5.2 is about, wait, if I move it like this, can you guys see it? No, you can't see it if I move it like that. Okay, there. So bilingualism and developmental language disorder, which is also referred to as DLD. So developmental language disorder, or DLD, is a neurodevelopmental condition that significantly affects language development in children despite typical development in other areas like cognition and hearing. It affects approximately 5 to 7% of the population, and it manifests differently depending on the language spoken. For example, English-speaking children often omit verb inflections, like saying things like John go there instead of John goes there. While Italian-speaking children struggle with eclectic pronouns, which I cannot give you an example of that because I'm not fluent in Italian.
No, but it doesn't matter. I'm gonna show this to you in Spanish, and there's enough Spanish knowledge.
It's the same in Spanish. I was just gonna say.
Yeah, in this respect. Oh, Manila, do you wanna tell what the clitics are?
So usually, like in Spanish, we may add. I'm not exactly sure how to explain it. I just know that in Spanish, we use it. Like, I have some examples. I don't know where I put them.
Okay, so Nadia, so hold on, before you go there, Nadia, do you know what clitics are?
Yeah, it's the short form of the pronoun.
Yeah, it's like like a reduced form of typically phonologically, but also morphologically reduced form of a pronoun. Yeah, so Spanish has those, Italian has those, lots of languages have them. So Manila, did you wanna give an example? Oh, she disappeared. Hi, Mary.
I don't know where I have the examples.
Yeah.
Because this was my part. I just know that I was reading it and.
Yeah.
But, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So I'll give one. So, Puerto Rican Spanish. That this is what happens a lot in my house. Te voy a decirte algo, right? So I'm going to tell you something, but this te in the very beginning, or sometimes dímelo, right? Like tell me that, but it's this la, lo, te. These are kind of small pronouns that they go in slightly different places in syntax than the regular full-size pronouns. They kind of climb up towards the subject. Those are clitics. In other languages, clitics all cluster together. For example, in Macedonian, they're all like, all the clitics have to form a package and they go right after the verb. So different languages work differently. In Spanish and Italian and lots of other languages, actually, you get the clitic se, right? You know, se puede, right? So what is this se, right? You can. It's this reflexive clitic. So it's a reduced form of a pronoun that often supports another noun or maybe even a pronoun. And so what the way the argument runs is in Italian, this is what kids with DLD screw up. This is what the non-target version is. Like, it's not really about the verbal inflection, it's about distribution of the clitics, which is kind of a reduced form of a pronominal. Okay? Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask about, it's in the DSM-5, but is it a specific disorder, or is it just like a symptomatic thing, maybe of another
Yeah, so
syndrome or
great
disorder?
question. Before we go there, what's DSM-5 in the first place, Luz? Can you tell people what DSM-5 is?
I know I had the thing written out, and I can find it in my notes if you want.
Well, anybody else?
It's like the
DSM-5?
diagnostic.
The
It's-
5th edition of the mental health list.
Yeah,
of
Diagnostic and
disorders.
Statistical Manual of Mental
Yeah.
Disorders, but
That's
the
right.
5th edition.
It's like this massive book with all of the, diagnostics and symptoms of,
Diagnoses.
of all kinds of potential disorders, right? And, if you have taken a look at the Henner article, which I posted, but it's also kind of floating through the next week, and so, like, the way we think about language and disorder is already complicated, right? Like, disordered language, this is already a problem. But, okay, we'll come back to this issue. But assuming that there are such things as actual linguistic disorders and other mental health related or not, cognitive disorders, that result in linguistic non-target forms in terms of linguistics, right? Then we ask, or Nadia asks, is this like just a set of symptoms, right? Or is this, what is that? Like, is this, right? And so what do we know about DLD in this respect, Luz? Is this just a bunch of symptoms? Is this something that's curable? Is this, what is that? How do we know it's a thing?
How do we know that it's a disorder?
Yeah. How do we know it's an actual disorder rather than, I don't know, something that you grow out of or something?
Well, kind of not what I was
I'm
asking.
getting to
hold
the
on,
diagnostic part.
Okay, hold on. And then Nadia's question was a little different apparently from what I thought.
I was asking, is this just is this a specific thing, or is this part of,
Oh,
is this
something
a
larger.
symptom?
Oh, right. So is it just comorbid with
Mhm.
something else and
Yeah.
it just shows up? Okay. So is it a specific thing or is it a part of a larger picture? Right.
Yeah.
So, what does your research say about that? Luz, is this like?
I don't think I understand the question. Can you rephrase it or state it again?
So is this disorder like present in people with another syndrome or disorder, or is this specific, like, can we locate this in a person with no other affected areas, just this
Just
kind
that.
of developmental language disorder?
Right.
I think it's like a standalone thing.
Yeah.
Because I went through what they listed with dyslexia and other things, and this could just be a standalone thing.
Yeah. Well,
That's what I got from my reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. And so I think the chapter also talks a little bit about that. That one of the ways you identify DLD is if nothing else is present. This is diagnosis by exclusion, right?
Mhm.
You're like, I see nothing else, but I see this. So we're just going to call it that, and we can't really say anything else. So this is also what people used to call SLI, specific language impairment. But now the literature has kind of landed on, let's call it DLD, because we know it happens early and it sticks around with a language user.
Mhm.
And if they start behaving somehow differently later, then that's only because they've been compensating. They figured out how to compensate, right? So getting away from the language of, like, the terminology of impairment, this is, or specific language impairment. So this is what they call DLD.
Alright.
Yeah, standalone. Great.
Sorry.
No, this is why we're discussing. Okay, keep going.
All right. So some diagnostic markers. Okay. Two of the strongest tools used to identify DLD are non-word repetition tests and sentence repetition.
So can you tell us about
These
that?
tests.
Can you tell, before
I'm
you go
sorry?
any further, can you please make sure to tell us what non-word repetition tasks are? Give us an example or something, but it
Yeah.
doesn't
So
have-
basically,
it
like,
doesn't have to be now.
instead of having. I'm sorry.
No, it doesn't have to be at this very moment. It would be at the end of the slide for, like, I just want to make sure that we mention that. Keep going.
I mean, it's just literally what it says, non-word. They're not words. So instead of having students read a sentence that they can memorize, it's non. They're not. They're words with no meaning. They don't exist.
Well, there's a little more to that.
Um,
There's a little more to that. Anybody else on non-word?
well, I mean,
English?
they still follow all the rules.
Okay.
But they're not.
That's right. So, and they don't have to be read, right? So they especially don't have to be read for DLD because nobody's interested in the reading part, because the reading immediately brings a new set of problems that you have to test, right? So typically repetition, non-word repetition task is I'm going to tell you a word that sounds, if it's a spoken language, or looks, if it's a sign language, like a word in the language we're testing, but it just isn't a word. Right? Like it's, yeah. Gorp. Gorp follows all the rules of English. Wug, right? Follows all the rules of English, but just does not happen to be a word. And so, how do you do well on this? So it turns out this is a very nice diagnostic. This is a non-word repetition, and the sentence repetition works just like that, right? I say a sentence, you say it right back at me. And then can you hold the sentence in your working memory? Immediately makes you realize that this is about working memory in addition to something else, right? Like linguistic work, functional linguistic working memory. Okay, keep going. Keep going, Luz. Oh, Luz is talking to a baby, I think.
Sorry, no, I'm trying to clear the room. Okay, so, all right. Let me go back to the big slide. Okay. Yeah, so the research that they showed was that children with DLD tend to perform poorly, regardless of language that they speak, while typically developing bilinguals generally do well. Bilingual children with DLD do not confuse their two languages. They show similar types of errors in both, indicating that the difficulties stem from the disorder and not bilingualism. Oh, some myths and realities. It's kind of like the same thing all along for the whole chapter, but there's a myth that bilingualism interferes with language development in children. In this case, in children with developmental language disorder. But in reality, the research shows no negative impact. Bilingualism doesn't cause confusion or worsen symptoms. In fact, they stated that bilingual children often show advantages in cognitive areas like theory of mind and may develop strategies to work around their language difficulties.
Okay, and I also have to stop people. I have to stop you again. So what's theory of mind? Do people know what theory of mind is and what are tasks associated with the theory of mind?
Is that a everyone question or do you want me to-
Yeah, it's everyone question.
This is the concept of like ego, right? Or am I getting this wrong?
Well, it's kind of related. It's not directly about the concept of ego, but it's kind of related to the idea of ego. And what is it?
I feel like I remember, I just can't put into words.
Yeah. So when you think about the concept of
Isn't
ego,
it?
okay, hold on just a minute.
Isn't it kind of like, sorry.
Yeah, can you hold just a second, Chelsea? So when you think about ego, like a concept of ego developing, what is it that you are developing? Like
a sense that you're an individual, like a sense that you have a mind. I don't know.
Yes, the sense that you're an individual. And what does that mean about other people?
That
They're also individuals.
Yeah, well, and they're outside of your head, right? Like that's what that is, right? If you are an individual and there must be other individuals just like you, and those individuals are outside of your head. That's basically the idea of theory of mind. Chelsea, I'm sorry to have interrupted. What were you going to add?
I was just gonna say, it's like the understanding that you have your own thoughts and beliefs, and the person next to you also has their own thoughts and beliefs.
That's
and
right, which may be different from yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of the idea, right? So before a certain age, children sort of seem to think that whatever they think, everybody else thinks. Like they have this idea that, these classic examples, you could be driving in the car and there will be a child in the back and then they'll say things like, did you see that? Like, what is the that? Well, they're under the impression that you saw exactly what they saw because that's in their head, right? That's theory of mind. And so there's some classic tests for theory of mind. So one of them is called the Skittles test. People know of the Skittles test? Have you heard of the Skittles test?
I don't remember hearing about it.
Yeah, I remember hearing something about it. I don't know what other people would have
No,
said.
I said I don't remember.
Oh, you
hearing
don't
about
remember hearing about it. All right. So how about people on the screen? Do you know anything about the Skittles test?
I do not. I've heard it. I don't remember what it's about.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you. This is a classic test for theory of mind. So here's how it goes. You bring a kid into the room, and then you pull out the box of Skittles, right? Those days, Skittles came in boxes. You could do this with crayons, but the traditional term is the Skittles test. You put the Skittles in a box, right? And the kid sees that there's Skittles in the box, and then you pour them all out, right? You just take all the Skittles out of there, and you put something else inside. Let's say crayons. And then you say to the kid, do you see this? The kid goes, oh, absolutely, I'm observing this. Not exactly the same terminology, but right? So the 3-year-old, very good at noticing what's happening. Very excited to see crayons going into the box that used to hold Skittles. So somebody new walks into the room, and you ask the kid, what do you think they're going to think that's in the box? Right? And so you, as an adult, can project the fact that the new person in the room looks at the box of Skittles. What are they going to say? What's in the box? Skittles, right. But what does the kid say at 3 years old? Crayons or Play-Doh, whatever, right? Why? Because that's what they saw going in, right? And at some point in their development, at about 3.5 years old, it switches, just like, like somebody presses a button. And so there has been arguments that maybe that's related to development of embedding, that Jill de Villiers has made that claim in various places, like in development of understanding of the term of attitudes predicates, what are called attitude predicates, so verbs like believe versus see, right? Because you have to kind of impose your belief system on somebody else. Yeah.
I remember in a class about first language acquisition, there was a problem with early language learners and the word me and you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. There's
Is
a
that
problem reversal
connected to
too. So maybe that's related. It's a little unclear because people used to say that this effect, this theory of mind effect, was pretty tightly connected to development of embedding. So she believes that blah 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 blah. So like these complex structures. But it doesn't look like that's true. So we don't actually know very well. So there may be some things that have to do with embedding. There may be some things that have to do with the actual term believe, like predicates of this sort. There's a cluster of potential possibilities and how they interact with one another. With that said, it may very well be connected to the same sort of issue that has to do with pronoun reversal, right? For a long time, kids think that this is me and this is you, right? So, because that's how people talk to them. They haven't separated the fact that a word, not only is the word different, but also my mind is outside of your mind. That part of the problem. Yeah. So that's the theory of mind. And as this bullet suggests, and maybe Lou's going to talk a little bit more about this, there has been at least one suggestion in the literature that says that it's not just the cognitive benefits, but as an emergent bilingual, you get the fact that your mind is outside of other people's minds before monolinguals do, right? So now comes a question. Why would a bilingual get these, Skittles tests faster or earlier than a monolingual? What makes bilinguals special in this respect, in terms of that kind of development of cognition? I don't know. Bilinguals are crazy.
I don't see anything that would lead me to believe that before seeing like direct evidence.
Yeah, there's evidence. There's evidence. So, but let's
I
think
don't-
about.
I'm just saying, like, I don't.
You can't even imagine. Like, why would that
Why?
be? Yeah,
Yeah.
why would that be? Anybody else? Why would bilingualism offer theory of mind type benefits? What do you have to do as a bilingual?
Because you're already exposed to two different things. You're aware that there's something different.
Yeah, that's
Because
sort
you
of the
know
idea.
both.
That's the idea. As a bilingual individual, even a young one, you are constantly having to decide this member of a set does not belong to that set, right? This is kind of what you have to do. You have to figure out the fact that there are different things that you have to pick from, which means that there is a separation between individual objects and individual types and individual humans and such. So that's how that story goes. That's how that narrative goes. You know,
I
we
can
need-
see it. I don't know about
Yeah.
that explanation specifically.
Yeah, but I mean that's the idea, right? So that's worth checking if you're interested in that literature. Look it up. So there's some interesting research on it. All right, keep going. Back to you, Luz.
All right, I'm gonna mute myself. All right, let's get going.
Yeah.
So best practices for diagnosing, we already talked about this, the non-oral repetition.
So can we talk about why non-word repetition is the best diagnosis, or best kind of type of diagnostic? Non-word repetition and just repetitions more general, right? Sentence repetition. Why not some other diagnostics? What makes non-word repetition good for this? Luz or anybody else?
I like understand non-word repetition, but I don't know how it plays out between participants. So I don't know, is this like between you just repeat it right after, or is there?
Yeah,
a
typically
task
you repeat it
between-
right after. No, usually you repeat
Okay.
it right after. Yeah.
And then an incorrect, like not incorrect, but like
Non-target.
non-target
Yeah.
response would be
Uh,
what for what?
You would, well, so one thing you could do is you could have the kid repeat it, or you could have the kid recognize it if that's a repetition. If they say it's not, then that's one way of doing that. Or if they repeat it incorrectly, right? So then it's also a non-target. Depends on the nature of the stimulus. But if, let's say, I asked for gorp and they said grop, that's non-target already. So it's not exactly the same, right? So,
Okay.
yeah. So what makes it a good plan for diagnosing things like DLD, or more generally? Manelli wants to say something.
I just have on my notes that when they test for DLD, they use the non-word repetition and sentence repetition, and it's because these tasks test memory and sound processing,
Yes,
which are often weak in children with DLD.
that's correct. Yes, they test work in memory and sound processing, which are weak or weaker in comparison with children with DLD. There is one other reason to consider these tasks. That's an important one. But there's one other reason to consider these tasks. Any thoughts?
They're novel words, so they're not something you would have ever encountered before.
That's right. That's right. They're
You
novel.
can't
Yeah, they're novel. They're novel words. You don't know them, but if you do know the structure of language, you can figure this out, right? And so, for that reason, both monolinguals and bilinguals, more generally, perform more or less identically on these particular tasks. And so then you can say, all right. So now that we're not comparing bilingual kids with DLD to monolingual kids without, like we really can't tell what's going on. So now we say, here's a task where bilinguals and monolinguals look just the same, because it's just testing sound production, or sound comprehension and sound production, and mapping into a particular linguistic set of rules, let's call them, right? And then we know that this diagnosis, or that set of symptoms comes with weakened work in memory and weakened sound mapping. Now we can test that. Right. Okay, is that clear? This is yes, this is no, yes, yes, no, yes, clear.
Yes.
Oh, okay, excellent. All right, keep going.
All right, now I think it's turn for Manelli.
Yeah,
Is the
wonderful.
5.2.
Wonderful.
Manelli, do you have to share your screen?
No, I don't
Very
have anything to share.
Okay,
I
I'm
mean,
gonna stop sharing that way so that we could look at each
Yeah,
other in some of the
that's right.
presentation.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
All right, cool. Let me resend this so everybody can see everybody equally. 'Cause some
No,
people are
okay.
bigger.
Have my notes here.
All right, Manelli, 5.2.
5.2. So this section, a lot of the what is it called? Oh my gosh. The citations led to books.
Mhm.
So I came across this one article. And it's published in Applied Psycholinguistic and is titled Bilingual Children with Language Impairment, a Comparison with Monolinguals and Second Language Learners.
Okay, author
And
and
the
year.
author?
Yeah, okay, author and year. Yeah, author and year first. Remember, author and year first. Okay, keep going.
Sorry,
It's all right.
year.
Okay.
I believe this was 20. Oh my god, I forgot.
Author,
I'll get back to the year.
Yeah, author year, author year, author.
I think it was 2008.
Okay,
I believe it was 2008.
but who is the author?
So the authors are Gutierrez Cleland,
Mhm.
Simon Cereido, and Wagner.
Yes. So yes.
Yeah, so there was 3 authors, and they explore how English verb morphology and subject usage can help identify language impairments in bilingual children, particularly Spanish English speakers and those who speak Hispanic English.
Sure.
So they.
So let's stop for a second. What's Hispanic English? What is that?
You know what? I had it in my notes, but
Well, let's see if we can figure this out together while you're looking. Hispanic English, anybody?
Hispanic English.
I feel like it's easy to like define because
I think it's like heritage. Sorry.
Okay, so hold on, Manelli. Nadia was talking.
It's
Yeah.
kind of defined by area, but it's just the English used in Spanish-speaking community.
Yeah, that's all. It's the English that's used in Spanish-speaking communities, and so if there are at least 2 Spanish-speaking people in this room. So, do you feel like the English used in the Spanish-speaking communities, to your knowledge, is a little different than English used outside of them?
Yes. And
You
no.
will do this, yeah.
I think it depends on the exposure.
Yeah, but okay,
of
setting
English.
this part aside, setting aside the notion of exposure, like, do you feel like there is such a thing as Hispanic English? Like in the community, people speak English, but it's
Oh,
a little,
yes,
it's
yes.
a little different than in the English spoken
Yeah.
in some other communities.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So what makes it different? What kind of things are you observing? Would you say?
In Hispanic English?
Yeah. If I were to say, name a couple of things that have to do with Hispanic English.
I think it's pretty much like what was in this in the article.
Well, I don't know.
And-
We haven't seen the article. Tell us about Hispanic English more generally, like from your perspective, aside from the article, right? So, like, if I were
I
to say,
think the grammar, like the grammar.
so there's
I
something
think
about
they sometimes mix it up with Spanish, but in English. I don't know how to explain it.
right. So we have to be really careful with terms like mix, right? Mix it up, right? Because it sounds like people are confused. But
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like it's not.
but it's
I don't wanna explain.
but no. But you're right? So
Transfer.
yeah, like some kind of a transfer, some kind of influence. Maybe we can talk about that, right? And there will be a time when we will spend at least 3 hours thinking about like how these grammars interact with one another. But we started thinking about this before, right? So, but there is this intuition that you have, Minelli, that Spanish somehow influences English in terms of grammar, right? In this variety, right? And maybe there are, maybe if I were to ask you to think about some explicit grammatical things, you might be able to come up with it, and maybe not. Okay, Luz, do you share that intuition that there is kind of a grammatically slightly different variety going on?
Yes, but I feel like it's just the differences are in the way we kind of make up words.
Okay, meaning what?
So
Let's use linguistic terminology.
Biking.
yeah, but that would be using, I don't know, like applying rules to, like, for example, to check something. One of the main ones that we do is like to check something, but you use the concept of checking to make it into chequear, which I don't think is even a word. So like kind of maybe the rules of what we make up would be different in like a Hispanic English in a community of Puerto Ricans versus a Hispanic English community of, like, I don't know, a Mexican culture.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
Right, may very well be the case. So now let's be really careful about this notion of chequear, because chequear is about Spanish with English influence, right? There's something about English in this word chequear, but like all of the stuff on the outside is Spanish, right? That's a verbal thing. So, but we could think about what happens the opposite direction, right? If you take like some kind of a Spanish word and then dress it up in an English way, right? And that's one way of thinking about that. So what this suggests is it's not just about words, although maybe some words, but it's also about morphology. And when language goes into the other, this brings us right back into the conversation of code switching and code blending, right? There's like this, all of us together, we will understand this word, and those people are not a part of this story, right? And maybe they have some other kind of English, but we have a Hispanic English. Whether or not Mexican community or Ecuadorian community or Chilean community is a part of this conversation, maybe you'd have to like have people bring in all of these different varieties so it would establish something that is clearly quote unquote Hispanic English. How about phonology? Do you hear it in phonology? Oh, you wanted to add something else. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just have to ask, is there any like exclamations or specific particles that you find in Spanish that you would say in English but they don't exist in English?
Yeah, that's a question. Is there anything
I'm more familiar with Singaporean influenced English, and they use the sentence final particles for like I don't know how to explain them. Exclamation, questioning.
exclamatives? They're called exclamatives. Yeah, yeah. They use sentence finals, final exclamatives. Yeah.
And interrogatives and
Okay.
evidentials.
Oh,
So-
very nice. Yeah, I didn't know this.
So I don't know about particles, but in phonology, Spanish does not have the SH sounds or the TH voice unvoiced sounds. Also the sound, like the U sound, and it's not in Spanish. And we tend to mix I and E, like those vocal vowels, in English and Spanish.
And so, are you suggesting that because Spanish doesn't have these segmentals, there's like these, right, just phonemes or allophones or whatever, doesn't have these sounds in phonology? Are you suggesting that what people have called Hispanic Spanish kind of shows you that, right? People, like, when people speak, they don't give you the difference between sh and ch, right? And they don't give you the difference they don't give you the th and the, right? Like, so you're saying it's all English, except the phonologically speaking, it's affected by the fact that there's been reanalysis, this is the term, linguistics term, there's been reanalysis of certain phonemes, and people just, and have substituted them for something else. But
Yes.
we gotta be careful, because the sounds are not th, right? Th is like letters, but the sounds are th and the, right?
Well, right. That I was saying the TH sound of voice. That's why I said voice and unvoiced, because if I was to do the unvoice, you wouldn't be able to really hear me.
Yeah, that's right.
You hear, but
Yeah. So, but that's a place to look, right? That's a place to look. The easiest way to start this conversation is to look at phonology, right? And this is what people will call accent, but like it's just phonology, phonology from a different place. Yes.
So when I think of these I guess influenced affected English, I would consider also monolingual speakers who are just in the community.
Yeah.
So are we still seeing that transfer of this phonology from
Yeah.
Spanish for
Yeah,
these monolingual students? Okay.
because it's kind of speaker independent, right? This
Okay.
is now a dialect or this is a variety in the community, right? And so if you happen to be completely not a speaker of Spanish, right, and you happen to be from Denmark, I don't know, and then you got dropped into a neighborhood where the English is what people have called Hispanic English, it is quite likely that that is what you will learn, and you will sound like you from, any of those places, or more importantly, from this particular enclave, right? So, so but that's what usually happens, right? And so that's why we want to say there is such a thing as whatever, if the community chooses to identify it as such, right? And then can this be learned? The answer is yes. Can you also learn some other variety? Of course you can, right? But this thing happens. Okay, good. All right, keep going. So Hispanic English, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, so the purpose of the study was to see if English grammar, especially like verb endings, can help identify children with a language impairment, even if they spoke Spanish at home. And also to find out if bilingual children make grammar mistakes in English because of the influence of Spanish. So they studied 71 children, and I believe they were Mexican descent, yes, between ages 4.5 to 6.5. They were split into 5 groups. So one of the groups was English only speakers with typical language. Another group was English only speakers with L1, not L1, with language, oh my God, what is it? Impairment.
Yes.
And then Spanish English bilinguals with typical language, Spanish English bilinguals with language impairment, and Spanish speakers learning English as a second language.
So across the spectrum, right? Across the spectrum, they've looked at
Yes.
people with DLD, without DLD, monolinguals, and bilinguals with DLD and without DLD, plus L2 learners. So the question here is, whatever we see in this particular group, does it come from L2? Does it come from DLD? Does it come from Spanish? Like, what does it come from? So that's the question.
Yes, so they used parent and teacher questionnaires to determine each child's bilingual status and language exposure. So to identify the language impairment, bilingual speech language pathologists use clinical judgment, parent-teacher concerns, and scores from the bilingual English-Spanish assessment.
So BESA. If you've been right, if you've been to my assessment class, you have seen BESA.
Yes.
And, on a different day, I will bring it for Nadia to see, and whoever else I will show you on the screen. That we have that. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So there were, it says, okay, scores of bilingual language assessments, specifically the English morphosyntax test and Spanish morphosyntax test.
Right.
So the test, it measured grammar skills, and children scoring below set cutoffs were classified as having the language impairment. I keep thinking DLD, so that's why I'm getting confused.
It is the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, but it's very different. So I'm like,
yes,
I keep thinking it's L1, but it's LI. Anyways,
that's right.
So they also looked at socioeconomic status. It was considered, they used basically like their school lunch programming eligibility to ensure the fair comparisons across groups.
Can we stop for just a second? Can we stop for just a second? Let's revisit this just to make sure everybody's clear. Why is school lunch, school lunch program a variable that tells us something about socioeconomic status in this country? In this, well, in many states, because that's no longer the case in several states, but in many states, this is still a variable associated with socioeconomic class. Why? Participating in a school lunch program.
Because depending on parental income, children qualify for free or for reduced lunch unless it's like Connecticut. Well, I don't think it's a Connecticut thing. Like New Britain, is doing free for everyone. Doesn't matter.
That's
But
exactly.
there's certain states, certain towns that they need proof that you don't have money, so you get it for free.
That's right.
We had free in Milford too, so
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just. Yeah, I don't know if it's specifically all of Connecticut.
It's not all Connecticut.
Okay.
It is the vast majority of Connecticut districts, I think, are they still use the school lunch. They still can use the school lunch as a variable to indicate something about socioeconomic class, because most towns in Connecticut do not give free lunch. Yeah, and some states do. I think Minnesota has free program for all kids. I think Utah does as well. There's a variety of states that kind of have this almost legislatively, but Connecticut is not one of those states. And it depends on the district. Go ahead. So that's one of the things
So
that-
within those assessments, they included tasks like story retelling and sentence repetition.
And also, before you go any further, Manelli, why would parental income or socioeconomic class matter in this case? Like, why do we even care about that variable? Aren't we just looking at linguistic development or non-target production of some morphosyntax? Like, why do we even care about how much money people have?
I'm guessing environment matters, I guess, when it comes to these type of assessment, and I guess they're implying maybe that if they have like a lower social status, economic status, that there's not, I don't know, as much opportunities to be exposed to like rich language. I'm not sure if that's coming out right. That's what I'm thinking.
Any other thoughts? That's an idea. Any other thoughts on the
Are
matter?
these just auditory oral?
Yeah, here, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just oral. But socioeconomic status is often a variable in looking at child linguistic development studies, and so one point would be like maybe less exposure gives you less rich language, right? And does that mean that if you're not exposed to a rich language, you are not going to perform with everybody else? Is that kind of how this rolls?
I mean, it's hard because I've known families who are kind of poor, who have very like rich in like their native language, like for example, my kids that come from Ecuador, like they're very mature and they speak like adults. I always found it interesting when students come from like South America, like their language is very strong in their native language. So I don't know.
Yeah,
to be honest.
so that's a question, right? So you have these experiences, but like setting those aside for just a second, just from a theoretical perspective, from a point of view of how you think about investigation questions or research questions, why would socioeconomic class tell us something about the language, for any reason, tell us anything about the language of a child? So option one, they have less exposure, and maybe if they have less exposure to the language, they won't develop quite as rich a language. But that may, true that this may or may not be, how does socioeconomic class participate in this discussion? Even about exposure.
Because the level of education.
Because of what?
Level of education.
Of level of education of the parents. Okay,
Right.
And why? Finish, take it all the way to the logical conclusion.
I'm sorry, why did I come to that conclusion?
Yeah, no. Take this argument to its logical conclusion. What does level education of parents have to do with a child, the child's linguistic production?
So, if the level of education in what the knowledge of language the parents have, their first encounter, the child's first, in most cases, I would think their experience with language is with their parents or siblings.
Well, I mean, their parents have full knowledge of language.
In terms of language, they have full knowledge because they're already talking, right? Like everybody's using this. The question is, why do you need the parent to be higher education so that they could provide richer input? Would you need them to have higher education for that?
To introduce them to it, I don't want to sound like that, but if they might have more experience with your language.
So would you say that let's just pick one, a professor in a fancy university who has a child versus a farmer who goes to the market who also has a child, would you say that in terms of the actual language that both of those adults speak, there is a difference in richness?
I would say the percentage would be higher with the professor.
Why? Nadia's shaking her head here for the record.
The language. Sorry.
Go ahead. What were you saying, Manelli?
Sorry, I was talking out loud. I was
That's all
thinking
right.
out loud.
Yeah, go ahead. Think
Yeah.
out loud. This is a good place for it.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, the
Or,
question
Mary.
the question was whether or not the professor's language, just more generally, is somehow richer than a farmer's language, especially when they're talking to a baby.
Where I think, to back Mary up, I think it really depends on their education and how and how much, just how much the children are exposed to it. And
No, but hold on. By the way, you're frozen. Your screen is frozen. Just you should know that.
mine?
Yes, right? Is it true for everybody? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, that's the education, right? Typically, professors have higher education than farmers. This is typically the case. Not always, but typically the case. So here's your level of education. So now the question is, do you think that the language of the professor is somehow better for the child than the language of the farmer? That's the question. Chelsea?
Well, let me ask you this: what's the definition of richer?
Well, because you were the one who said something about the richer language, right?
No, I said that.
Oh, you said that. Okay. So, well, is it somehow better, right, for the language for the
Yeah,
child?
like Dutch language.
Is it more proper? Is it better? Is it more vocabulary that they have? What does richer mean?
Chelsea has.
I think to me it's all the above, everything you just mentioned.
Okay, so
It's like higher vocabulary, more
Proper grammar.
Yes.
So I would say if that's what richer is, then I would say that
You know what I'm doing.
because the education in most cases, but I don't want to say in all cases. I mean, a farmer can be very well educated, and speak, but in the higher probability that the professor would be.
Has a better language than a farmer for the child. Chelsea, you got something to say? Because Nadia's dying here. Okay, Chelsea's got something to say, then Nadia will jump into this.
I was just listening to this argument in this discussion, and the question about whether the language a professor gives to their child compared to a farmer would be richer or better, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think when we're looking at socioeconomic classes in an education setting, and we're talking about free and reduced lunch and all of that, kids that are in lower socioeconomic areas or families typically come into the classroom with less experience than their peers, right? And so they might not understand, like, if you're going to a museum, what are the social cues and the language that you need for going to a museum and the rules of the museum, right? So I don't necessarily, like, language wise, I don't think the vocab is different. I think the experiences surrounding the language and the understanding of that social piece of language is what comes in with a more higher social economic class family.
So social cues and perhaps literacy practices is what you're pointing to.
Yes.
Okay, maybe, but that, because
Maybe.
there's money for such things. Okay, all right. Nadia here is dying because I don't know if you noticed, but I've set you all up for this conversation because we know how the story goes. Let's see what Nadia has to say.
The professor and the farmer's language are no different. They had their language set in stone in early childhood. Education does not matter. For my explanation of why there might be a change with socioeconomic status, there's just generally a change in brain development with low nutrition, low activity, with lower socioeconomic classes, and parents might be more out at work, working for lower wages, but working all the time, trying to make ends meet, where you have children not being neglected, but their language is not being exposed to them as much.
Perhaps in the same way or something, right? Just sheer number of hours, perhaps that's a possibility, right? So this is an important point, right? So I've heard things like proper. There is no such thing as proper language for the child. It's not like there. First of all, what's a proper language? This is like somebody decided that some language is better than the other, right? That's all it is, typically prescriptively, and the child ignores this completely. The child doesn't hear the difference. The job of a child is to break into a system of the input that's coming. If there is input, it doesn't matter how much money people are making, because if you are working with your caregiver in the fields and you're spending all this time with them, you are getting lots of language. And if you're not, like your parents who have a ton of money but leave you alone in front of a video camera or in front of a video game, then you're not getting the language. Like that's really where that's it. You need to have rich linguistic exposure, where rich really means different type of structures and different types of vocabulary. So in this respect, the language of a professor and the language of a farmer do not differ from one another at all. It's all about how wide of a picture is the child like observing, how much data is coming at the kid versus a lot of it versus a little.
So it's not the same as exposure.
Yeah, but exposure to what, right? Like, yes, you need exposure. You need exposure to the language, and you need language practice, and it doesn't matter how much money you make, right? So that's the point. However, people have asked, especially based on the kind of suggestions that just came out of Nadia, right? And Chelsea, if we're looking at, let's say, kids who are, 8 years old, kids who have been read to all day or been told stories to versus kids who haven't, kids who have been getting nutritionally rich foods versus kids who haven't, kids who have been going to museums versus kids who haven't, you like wind up with more information about language. Like that's really the only thing that.
Or having tutors and playing sports and being exposed to different experiences.
Right,
I feel like
exactly.
that is,
Exactly.
a lot of places.
Yeah, but that's really, but you don't need those things, right? What you need is lots of different types of language exposure, because if you don't have tutors or play sports, but you spend an hour or 2 hours every day talking to different members of the family, and they talk to you and tell you stories, grandparents, for example, and aunties and all that, that's just as good, or if not better, right? Because you're experiencing lots of language. That's what you need. But there's no
And I agree with that.
But you know what I don't get? Let me throw this out. And I'll just throw this out. Then why do school districts that have more money, and those in the town, those residents have more money. How come those kids do better in standard testing overall? I definitely, it's, you can't just say that the farmer and the professor, it will always fall that way. But then how is that explained?
Anybody wants to take that? Not just ready to jump in. Look at that baby. I'm getting all distracted.
The problem is schools are funded by their constituents, so underfunded schools have less educational resources, and teachers are not as willing to work in these schools because they're being paid less. So you have not worse teachers, but slightly worse teachers.
And also just more stressed teachers, right?
Yeah.
They're overwhelmed.
But it comes back, but it does come back to economic.
Yes.
Sure, it comes back to economics. It just has nothing to do with language. That's the issue, right? It has something to do with resources and economy and how the state funds education. But it has nothing to do with people's language. And we know that if we actually looked at people's language and gave them the benefit of the exposure to language that they really should have, right? It's really, right, it's all about the kind of economic opportunities that Chelsea also talked about, right? Like if you go to museums and you make these inferences and you have more literacy practices because somebody spends the time to teach you about literacy, and there's only like 7 of you in class versus there's 40 of you in class, right? There's chances of you getting practice in literacy and all the literacy related stuff like inferences and summaries, right, is just much higher if somebody gives money to your school. And money to the school comes directly from people's taxes.
And there's also something to be said with, like if you go to Greenwich, their schools, they test high, but you also have to look at the students. A lot of them might be getting private education.
That's right.
Home education, tutoring opportunities that lower economic status students it's not available to them.
Exactly. So all of those are the reasons. So this was kind of an important diversion. We can talk about this some more, obviously, but I'd want to close this part of the discussion and make it be clear that you see people in literature use socioeconomic status because some folks sometimes ask this, right? Does this have something to do with people's money? Does this have something to do with the more opportunities, to go to places like museums and whatever, read books at home? And sometimes that's the answer, right? Just like we went through. But other times it is not. And so we take this back to the paper that Minnelli's talking about. So does, for example, socioeconomic status say anything about what the findings were?
So I talked about what they did, how they assessed them.
That's right.
So when they did the assessments, they found that children with language impairment, both English only and bilingual, have more trouble using correct verb endings.
Mm-hmm.
Verb endings were a good way to spot the language impairment.
Yeah, DLD. But did the socioeconomic status play a game here? Were kids with richer parents did one way, and kids with poorer parents did the other thing?
I will have to go back and look at that detail.
Take a look. So generally speaking, the answer is no. The socioeconomic status does not do anything here. Yeah, but you'll have to look into
I think they use it as a way to collect information too, because it's part of the questionnaires. They're asking background information. And,
Yeah, no, you're right, but you can't. You have to ask for particular reasons, and as we kind of conferred for a while, there may be a whole group of people thinking that maybe this will be about how much exposure to the language you have, right? How much exposure to literacy practices you have. And the answer in this paper, to my memory, and many others, has got nothing to do with how much money you make. Kids of like $1 million making person versus kids whose parents work minimum wage, will do exactly the same thing, right? And so that tells you it's not about getting more books in the house or whatever, getting a tutor. It's really about something that your language is undergoing, right? It's about a thing that's happening to your language. DLD. Well, wherever it is,
Okay.
maybe here, not here.
They also found that there were no signs of Spanish interfering with English grammar,
Mm-hmm.
and that English learner, EL2 learners had trouble with verb endings, but not because of a language
Yeah.
disability.
For a whole lot of different reasons, right?
Yes.
Right.
So yeah, that was the findings. Let me see. So the study found that bilingual and AL2 children often show more grammatical forms which may resemble. So yeah, that's that part. So sometimes it can resemble a language disability, but it stems from language transfer or dialectal features.
That's right. So sometimes they look the same, but they're not. Right.
Right. So then it says, while verb morphology can be a useful marker, it must be interpreted with caution. Because there are children who are labeled with DLD who don't have DLD.
That's their point. That's literally their point. It looks the same, but when you start looking carefully, you notice that it's not the same thing. Yeah. But you gotta know.
I actually I was in a school last week. I'm doing field experience in middle school, and there's a student there, and I've worked for him twice, and I noticed certain things, and I was like, about his language and stuff, and I saw him using some scaffold supports, and I asked his teacher, I'm like, does he have more? It's not just ESL, like there's more to him, and she's like, he has DLD, but then I'm like, I don't know if that may be it.
Yeah, how do you know, right?
And I was telling her, I'm like, he just got diagnosed in 5th grade. So it's kind of like later on in life too.
Yeah. But, well, now you know what tests people use, right? For DLD versus multilingualism, right?
Yeah.
So that's one way of thinking about that. Yeah.
So.
All right, now did you want to add something? Nope. All right. Good. This, is everybody cool with this article? Everybody good with this? Thanks, Manelli. I think this may be a good time for a 10-minute break or so, and I will see you at 6:20, yeah? We're good? Excellent. Sometimes we gotta explain these things, right? We gotta talk about this stuff. Because otherwise, it just doesn't get discussed. And then bleeds into the classroom, and then everybody loses.
I have a paper that I want to discuss. I'm on chapter 5.7, and they must have scanned it with just like a printer scanner because
What is this paper?
Ku et al.
Oh, good, yeah.
I can't find a better copy of the paper, but
Just look for it.
this image was just completely destroyed by the copying process.
All right, let's see if we can find the paper.
It's an MRI, and I'm supposed to be seeing something, but it's just
See nothing.
a black picture with some white dots.
Okay, cool. All right, let's see. Maybe we can find it. All right. Okay. So
NIH.
So hold on, it's cool, Patricia Cool, yes. QHL, cool, and then what?
1996, selective language aphasia.
1996, Selective language aphasia.
From herpes simplex encephalitis.
Okay, so
there's a link from
I'm looking, hold on, speech perception.
NIH.
From the NIH?
From NIH, it leads to a full text link, which leads to Science Direct,
Why don't I see this? What's the name of the article? It is selective language aphasia is the name of the article?
Selective language aphasia from herpes simplex encephalitis.
From herpes. Bilingual aphasia, no. For surgical. Why don't I see it? Patricia Cool 96, you said.
Koo et al. 96. Aubrey Koo.
Oh, not Patricia Cool. That's Aubrey Cool. Okay, cool. KU?
KU.
Okay. Alright, selective. Okay, I see it. Alright, let's find out. Oh, it's in pediatric neurology. Okay. Cool and Luckman. Luckman and Negler.
Pediatric neurology?
Yeah, it's in pediatric neurology.
Oh, yeah.
15-2. Yeah.
I must have been looking at the wrong one for that. I thought it was different. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I see. I see what you mean. Yeah.
See the image, figure 1?
Yeah. Cannot tell. What a pain. Okay, can I do a 2-page view? No, I don't know.
I get the rest of it. I would like to see the figure.
Why don't I? Document properties. Yeah. I can't do it. Okay, view PDF. Hold on. Ooh, MRI with Galdanium demonstrating increased signal of left temporal lobe. Yeah, that's very hard to see, but you can see that there's stuff going on in the left temporal lobe. How's that? Yeah, represented encephalitis. Interesting. Your article is like two and a half pages. It's very short. Nice to report. 16-year-old right-handed Chinese English bilingual parent. Interesting. Curious. Well, let's hear all about it. It's unfortunate that we can't see it, you're right. It's kind of old. Good? Oh, looks like a present. How many classes are you taking this semester? How many classes are you taking this semester?
6. One's just like a study with Gilbert Diolti, so.
With Gail?
Yeah.
What are you, doing something Latin or something?
Yeah.
Of course you are. Yeah. Okay.
The 3rd class in Latin major, so minor, not major.
I did not know we had a Latin minor.
It's
We probably don't. They just made one for
it's
you.
a world language.
Yeah.
World language minor. You can choose which language. So it's like
Yeah.
you could do Spanish, Italian. I don't think they do Polish, but
Oh, I think they do Polish.
they have Polish classes. But I don't think you can take the class for minor.
Mm.
You might be able to. I don't.
God, it's been so long since I've done Latin. Wow. I remember when I started taking Latin, our Latin instructor said, if you remember how to say, what is this? To err is human, to forgive divine in Latin, then you can get off with whatever. It was great. Every time you made a mistake, she'd be like, and then you'd say this phrase, which of course I no longer remember. Then it was fine. How do you say this? I don't remember. It's attributed to whom? I don't even remember.
I never heard that one.
Yeah, no? To err is human, to forgive divine. That is coined by English poet Alexander Pope in 1711, which is not necessarily Latin, as it were,
Well,
because Pope did not write in Latin.
you gotta make it.
Yeah, you
fancy.
do. You do. Okay. Errare humanum est, ignosere divinum est. Humanum est, ignosere divinum est. That sounds better.
Is human.
Mm-hmm. To forgive is divine. All right, Mary is back. Looks like Mary is back. Mary, was this part clear in the discussion? No, we just diverted into.
It was clear, but don't get mad at me. I
Okay.
still don't buy it.
You don't have to.
I'm still not 100% sold on it.
So, what is it that you don't buy? What part?
I'm not saying in every case, but if I look at, when you say rich, I'm understanding a rich language is vocabulary, understanding, comprehension, and all that. Am I wrong about what rich is?
So, in my perspective, a rich language. Can you even see me? I don't know where I'm sitting. Yeah. So, in my perspective, in the perspective of the literature, rich language has to do with diversity of vocabulary. So both, width and depth, right, of this paradigm. So it has to be diverse in this respect. It has to be diverse. Language has to be diverse in the kinds of grammar that's coming at the kids, right? So let's say not just one or two tenses, but all the tenses, and embeddings, not embeddings, subjunctives, declaratives, like all kinds of grammatical things. So rich language really has to do with diversity of morphosyntax and diversity of vocabulary. And also, what's really helpful is if the kid also has, if the kid also has exposure to different types of pragmatic situations, right? So you say this in this situation, you say that in this other situation, right? And so this is what it means to be linguistically rich.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all. Nadia wants to add
Sorry.
something. Go ahead.
When we say vocabulary, we're talking high frequency words. Professors not coming home and giving their lecture to their 2-year-old.
Yeah.
So we're not getting those high education,
Low frequency words. Yeah.
genre specific words. We're getting these high frequency words, but we're getting a lot of them.
That's right. You get a lot of different kinds, and then, but richness really has to do with like the diversity of both levels of frequency as well as different types of words, right? And that's what richness has to do with. Right. That's it.
I still believe there is some, how do I say it? I believe that overall, at a certain, maybe at a certain age it matters, I don't know, but I still believe overall that there's a higher percent, not all case, but a higher percent that the vocabulary, the
So,
rich
so you're
is
suggesting
influenced
so you're
by-
saying socioeconomic class matters. No, I don't think anybody disagrees more generally that socioeconomic class matters precisely for the reasons that have been already articulated. It has to do with different types of things going on, but not really about early linguistic development. And this is sort of the point. Does your like the way your language is set up, does that, like, as as Luce's baby is sitting there observing the language, right, and kind of trying to break into the system, does socioeconomic status of the caregiver matter? And the answer is pretty well say no, right? It's not about that at all. It's about what kind of language comes at a kid. So how many opportunities does the kid have to figure out the right kind of the target system for the language? And what you need for that is not money. What you need for that is people doing language with you and to you, right? However that happens. Now, sure, at some later stage of child development, maybe socioeconomic variable matters precisely because you eat better, you eat more nutritionally, you go to museums, you have lots of books, blah, 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 blah. But that's not about how you set up the language that you're going to use in your life, right? Like that setup happens very early on, right? And this is where that's at.
I have to believe, because Luce is a teacher and she's in the education world, that her baby will have more exposure than someone, not one for one, but overall, because Luce is a teacher and other teachers, whatever, that they're taught how to do that. They're certified to do, that. I have to believe there's an advantage to that.
So you have to, I don't know why you have to believe that, but you should know that no literature will support you on that.
Can I give you
Nadia?
just an example of, we have an unnamed teacher who comes back to their home and they speak for half an hour to their child or around their child. But there's a very lesser educated, they didn't go to college, they just graduated from high school. And they're around their child, they're a stay-at-home mother. The whole day they're speaking around their child, they're speaking to their child.
Who gets more language? Who gets richer language? The child of a educator who spends 30 minutes with the kids, or the child of I don't care, mechanic, it doesn't matter who. But somebody, or a person who's not working, who talks to the kid all day, who gets more language?
But then there are studies
No, hold
that
on.
infants that-
Hold on. Who gets more language? First question.
I would, but here's my thought. There are studies that young children learn to talk from other children. So if that child's in a daycare environment, that could be something different.
We can say that, yeah.
Sure, but is that the same amount of different type of language that an adult input provider can produce than, let's say, another 3-year-old?
But that's not that's not education. That's
right. That's not. Yeah, it's something else.
Putting a child into a place where there's more
That's right.
input, and
That's
all input is equal to a child.
Yeah.
Early on.
Ish. Yes, exactly. Because if you have input that varies in depth and width
Mm-hmm.
versus input that doesn't, those are not two different. Those are different kinds of input.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. So I mean, I encourage you to look more into this literature. I encourage you to look more into this literature. Okay, great. See what you started?
Can I say something?
No. Yes, of course you can.
I'm kind of gonna back up Mary, because when I had my first 2 kids, I wasn't as educated, and I did have them around me. The language was okay, but I feel like with my 3rd child, I gave him not only more oral language, talking to him, but also because I was in education, especially during COVID, where we were in the shutdown, like I literally ordered like all the foundation
Okay.
posters that they use at the school. I set up his whole room as a classroom, and he was like one of the top readers in his class, and like his language, was very strong, a lot stronger than my other two kids when I had them younger, and I didn't really expose them to that. So I see the difference and what you're saying, Mary, like, kind of just because I am in this role where I know more about education and I'm able to I gave my son a lot of,
Nadia's about to
um,
die here.
it's what?
Nadia's about to die here. She wants to leap. Go ahead and finish.
This is just from personal experience,
Yeah.
I've always told myself, like, oh my gosh, I wish I knew then what I knew now, and I was able to give my older kids now, when they were younger, what I was able to give my third child, just because it was just for my child was a better linguistic and educational experience,
Sure.
and I've seen the benefits from
Sure.
that.
So let's hold for a second. Nadia, do you want to answer, and so I can wrap this conversation up and tell you where you should? I'm about to add a new video to this. Go ahead.
All right.
She's like, you should see
You
this.
you
All
gave
right.
your child more exposure. That's it. That's the only part of that changed your child's language outcome.
That's
You spent more time with your child, more time speaking to your child. It wasn't about your education level that changed that. If you spent the same amount of time with
Your other
any
two kids.
child,
Or any two. Yeah.
you would have that. And also,
No. Let me. I
You
did
guys,
spend. I actually spent more time with my younger ones because I wasn't in school and I only worked part time. I actually worked full time and went to full time school with my third.
So
There was a lot of time spent with my other children.
yeah, but the issue is
It
not
was
that.
just I don't feel like the language was like as strong, or
Right.
I didn't provide that educational support like I did with my third.
So the issue is the true issue, and you're welcome to go look at, and I encourage you to go look for research about this, because it's not really about how we feel, right? It's about what the literature says out there, and research is very clear on this point. To Nadia, like to back up Nadia's story here, it's not just the sheer amount of talking that you did to your previous two kids. It's about what kind of linguistic input you're providing, right? And so that's got nothing to do with your education. You know more, that's great, but that's like irrelevant, right? If you knew what kind of linguistic input to provide for, like what makes it richer, right? You would have done this with your first two kids, right? If you had spoken to your kids in the way you speak to other adults, which you didn't, I'm sure, that just doesn't happen, right? But also there is literature on, and I'm about to send the link to all of you, on what happened during to a bunch of multilingual children during lockdown. So there's a large study, cross-sectional study that was done in the UK with kids from all sorts of places in the world, and how their linguistic progress had shifted during the pandemic. And the answer, at least to some degree, is much what you described, because kids hung out with their parents much more, right? They're like,
L1 more?
I'm sorry?
They had their home language more?
Yeah, they had much more home language, and they had much more what we now call literacy practices without even any orthography, right? Because the kids are like, well, tell me what happened. Tell me what you did all day. And the kids is having to interact with a parent in a way that they normally wouldn't or didn't, right? So, but let's table this discussion for now, and I encourage you to look at the literature, and I will put Serratrice's talk, the video for the Serratrice's talk on actually part of a panel discussion, so you can actually listen to what she and her colleagues had found. But that's something for us to keep in mind. But let's move all of this topic and go to something else. Thanks, Manila. Thanks for opening that giant can of worms. We'll be back to this to this can later on. All right, excellent. Is there anything else for 5.2, Luz, that you wanted to bring to our attention? She's like, absolutely not. We got to move on. All right, moving on. But good discussion, everyone. Good discussion.
All right, let's go to 5.3. Let me share this again. Can you guys see it?
Not yet, but it's coming, I'm sure. Not yet. Yeah, it's coming. There you go. 5.3.
Okay.
Dyslexia.
All right, so 5.3 is bilingualism and dyslexia. Brief overview of dyslexia. The text classifies it as a specific learning disability that affects reading and spelling, despite otherwise typical cognitive and neurological development. It's more prevalent in languages like English or French compared to ones like Italian. It also involves broader linguistic challenges, including phonological processing, vocabulary retrieval, and morphosyntactic comprehension.
Yeah.
Some misconceptions about bilingualism and dyslexia. The text reiterates that being bilingual does not intensify dyslexia. I say reiterates because a lot of the diagnoses in here, everyone are kind of explaining that whatever it is, bilingualism doesn't affect it.
Well, but okay, let's stop for just a second and think about this, right? For a long time, people thought that that was the case, and certainly in many districts, you still find suggestions like this. Well, this kid is dyslexic, so let's not add another language to their schedule, right? This is still out there. Okay. Go ahead.
So while bilingual children may initially face reading challenges, especially if their second language is their school language, these issues are often temporary and related to vocabulary gaps rather than the actual dyslexia. In fact, the text also stated that bilinguals often develop language-specific reading strategies and can even outperform their monolingual peers with dyslexia and tasks like reading and metalinguistic processing.
Uh-oh, I think Manelli has a question for you, or for the rest of us.
Manelli, go ahead.
So, I know this is like, it's something I've been very interested in learning, like dyslexia with like bilingual students. But if it's you said neurodevelopmental disorder,
Yes.
and you said it has to do with spelling.
Yes.
So if they have issues with spelling, reading, right?
I mean, spelling and reading would be related, right? Because of that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, and maybe you're gonna answer this later, but how can they become like biliterate if they have issues in both languages with spelling, reading?
Can you become? So the question is, can you become biliterate with such with this disorder? Let's call it that.
Disorder.
Right? Yeah. So how can you become biliterate if you can't get around trying to figure out what the letters are, right? So something like that. So
Right, because
right.
when you're biliterate, it's that you can read and write in both languages.
2 languages, yes.
Yes.
So anybody wants to take that on? So the question is, how is it possible if you have difficulty with letters and therefore reading? How can you become biliterate? Anybody wants to take that on?
The same way you become monoliterate. It's the same process.
Exactly.
So
Very short answer. So the question that underlies the question you asked, Manelli, is how can a person with dyslexia become literate in the first place, right? That's the question. So, and that, there's literature on that, like how people compensate and what kind of strategies the mind uses to to say, no, it's not this, it's that other thing, right? Something like that, right? But notice, if you're a bilingual person, you have been doing this number for a while. Oh, it's not this, it's that other thing. And therefore, if this is about strategies of it's not this, it's that other thing, bilingual person wins because they've been doing this for longer, they've practiced this for longer, this is what they do with languages all day, every day. And therefore, the argument goes like this. It's difficult to become literate if you are a person who has dyslexia. But if you're going for another language, the process is identical, plus the fact that your brain is already practicing this inhibition and selection of the right thing. So it's arguably the case that you're going to be better and faster at literacy if you have two languages to work around with, because the brain has been practicing this for a while.
So if you have dyslexia, is it something like, is it a disorder that it's always been there and it stays, or does it get better with practice and strategies?
It does not get better at all. What people wind up doing is they accommodate, they figure out strategies, right?
To help them read and write.
Right, inhibiting the wrong thing, right? So if I look at a letter D, and you look at a letter D, both of us know that this is a D, right? But if you're a person who has dyslexia, you now think, maybe this is a D, maybe this is a B. Now you have two options. Right?
My father and brother are both dyslexics. My brother during school had to switch from white paper to colored paper.
That's right. That helps.
And my father never got accommodations.
Yeah.
Just older. So I guess high school didn't give him any.
Yeah. Yeah. And people just didn't know really what to do with dyslexia. But yeah, it doesn't go away. You just give yourself strategies to recognize, to like inhibit one form of the stimulus over the other. And like I said, right, if you are entertaining both D and B, then you have to at some point make a decision whether or not it's a D or a B, where a person without dyslexia doesn't have that thing going in their head in the first place, right? But as every bilingual does, trying to entertain two stimuli and decide which one is the right one, that's what we already do, right? So that's why biliteracy actually, well, helps, but certainly people who are working towards biliteracy do better than people who are working only in monoliterate scenarios, right? Because that's the story. But to your point, it's still difficult. Learning to read is still difficult for people with dyslexia. Like, it's still difficult. Doesn't matter if you're, monolingual or bilingual, it's still difficult. It never goes away. You learn strategies. Bilingualism helps. Okay? All right, let's go. It was back to you, I think, yeah?
So for 5.3, I was the one that actually. Wait. Okay, so Siegel's study. I was the one that took one of the studies from this section.
Okay, cool.
It's from Siegel 2016, published in Multilingualism, Literacy, and Dyslexia by Rutledge. Which explores how dyslexia presents in children learning English as an additional language. So instead of, they use it as EAL, or they refer to it as EAL. This study examines whether bilingualism complicates the identification or the characteristics of dyslexia, which is an essential question in diverse classrooms where distinguishing between a language learning challenge and a true reading disability can be difficult.
That's right.
Within this study, Siegel found that bilingualism does not cause or exacerbate dyslexia. Children with dyslexia, whether they were monolingual or English as an additional language learners, share similar profiles, particularly in areas where phonological processing, in areas like phonological processing and reading.
So what they do? You're going to tell us what they did? What's the methodology and all that stuff?
I would have to look at my notes. I did.
I did. Okay, let's make sure that we can do this every time. Okay, keep going.
Okay, I got the date. I got the article. Everything else.
Okay, but notice what's happening here. So the issue here is phonology, right? It's phonological. There's something in mapping of phonology to the right, to the target item, to the target symbol. That's sort of where things go awry. And of course, the question now arises whether that's always going to be true with people, like irrespective of the kind of writing system you have, right? So so this is a kind of a phonological loop-related thing that also converges on the processes that have to do with mapping on symbols, right? So that would be part of the question. Like, do kids, dyslexic multilingual kids, or as well as monolingual kids, behave similarly, let's say, in Korea as they do in France, right? So that, you know, because it's a different script, different writing system, or in the, you know, UAE or something like that. So if you have an alphabetic versus a logophoric one or something like this, right? So that would be part of the question to ask. Yeah. But dyslexic traits look very similar, and so you have to see the diagnosis. Okay, keep going.
Okay. I think that's the end of 5.3. I already talked about the study. The next one is 5.4, which is bilingualism and autism spectrum disorders. Autism spectrum disorders, also known or shortened to ASD, is a neurodevelopmental condition defined by difficulties in social interaction, communication, and behavioral flexibility. Children with ASD often struggle with things like making eye contact, interpreting others' emotions, and adjusting to social norms. Um, these challenges can coexist with heightened or reduced responses to sensory input. Because communication issues are a core part of ASD, there's a widespread concern that bilingualism might worsen these difficulties. However, the research suggests that this is an assumption.
And is there anybody presenting on this section?
5.4. I don't think someone has this one.
Hey,
actually.
Mary,
It's
what?
me.
Oh, that's
Oh,
Mary.
you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have
Oh,
it when
that's
I get
right.
to the part. I have the person's
Okay,
name. So
great.
if it's you, then
Okay, cool.
yeah. I mean, I do want to talk about this one. There's no evidence. Am I on the right slide? Bilingualism worsen. Yeah, there's no evidence that bilingualism has a negative impact on children with autism spectrum disorder. Studies comparing monolingual and bilingual children across multiple languages find no difference in vocabulary size, and in many cases, bilingual children actually have a larger total vocabulary.
So this is an important conversation. Hold on. This is kind of an important conversation because in many places, so it's not typical to have if the school has like a room with several autistic children, right? Now you can if English is an additional language to them, they might be getting instruction. But in many districts, they don't. They just sort of camp out with like other kids with disabilities. And most of the time, kids with disabilities don't get exposure to another language, right? They don't go to French, they don't go to Spanish, they don't go to German. They do something else under the assumption that it's very hard for autistic kids to process another language. Now, what do we think about this notion? It's hard for autistic kids to process an additional language.
What was the question again?
So, what do you think about this notion that it's hard for autistic kids to process another language, an additional language?
I think there's a lot going on in their brain as it is. I'm not sure. You know, this is something that I've been wondering about. Students who are on the spectrum. I actually have a student who was diagnosed with DLD, and actually just a couple weeks ago we were wrestling with, is it DLD or autism spectrum? And I was a very strong advocate with pushing the autism spectrum disorder because of his behaviors. A lot of the behaviors that he exhibited that I just figure wasn't DLD. Just because when he first came in his native language, I was able to see it more. And then now 2 years later, because he's speaking a little, he is acquiring the language. But the process seemed a little different. At the same time, it's similar to Spanish, like the certain fixation with certain things, certain phrases that he would do in Spanish, now he does them in English. So I think that they're able to acquire a second language. But then again, the autism spectrum is so broad, it really depends on the person and what their struggle is. I feel like it's just so different. So some people who are nonverbal, they can't talk. With some can.
Right. So setting aside the possibility of nonverbal, and I know there are other people in the room that might want to weigh in on this, but so setting aside the nonverbal situation that makes it really difficult to test. So setting those kids aside. How do you, what is your take on whether processing an additional language is hard or appears to be harder for a person with autism? Anybody else wants to weigh in on this?
It depends on if processing a single language is hard. I think if processing a single language is hard, processing a second one would be just as hard.
Because it's a processing of language.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not about the second language, right?
Yeah.
That's your point. It's about the processing of a language more generally.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Anything else?
And that's what I kind of meant to say. It's processing the language because, like I said, with this student, I see the same pattern in English now as he's acquiring the second language as I've seen him in Spanish when I first met him.
Sure. But the question, let's abstract from the real people, even though that's always a dangerous thing to do. But let's think this about this in terms of kind of a theoretical idea, right? It's kind of abstractly and conceptually. What would make anybody believe that a person who, some people prefer artistic person or person with autism, it depends on who you are. Anyway, so a person who's been diagnosed as with ASD. So what would make anybody believe that it's hard for a person with ASD to, diagnosed with ASD, to learn another language? It's hard or almost impossible or whatever, or bad for them or something. What would make anybody believe that?
Self-reporting.
Okay, so can you expand on that?
I mean, unless all of the researchers have tried to take another language or learn another language themselves and also have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, there's no way to know if they're having difficulties with it unless they are getting feedback from someone who has both tried to learn a second language and has autism.
I mean, there is more to be said about that, because you could exhibit give kids or adults exactly the same test as you give to monolinguals, or even DLD populations and all of that, right? And then just see how they do, right? You can also do that. So that's not the only thing. You can actually run actual assessments, right? The language assessments. But to your point, self-reporting would be one way, right? You listen to the people and they say, second language is really, really, really hard for me, right? That would be one thing. Has anybody heard people with ASD say second language is really, really hard for me? Anybody ever seen anything like this? You ever seen anything like this?
I'm autistic and
Good. Now it says, I'm autistic and I know a zillion languages. Right? So that's not a thing, technically, right? So if an autistic individual seems to say that language is really hard for them, it might not actually be the language, right? What might it be? If they say, oh, language is really hard for me, especially learning in this classroom, it's really, really tough for me. It may not be the language, it may be something else. Like what?
Undue scrutiny is definitely a big one that has happened in.
Can you unpack this fancy term, undue scrutiny?
When you're autistic, everything becomes part of autism. It's like you can say something wrong, and it's the normal development of a child, but you're just. This is now like something that
Everybody's
you're
noticing
different.
that this is wrong,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Mhm.
because you've already been diagnosed.
And then that child is getting this negative evidence. They're just getting this scrutiny.
Yeah.
And I don't like the term self-fulfilling prophecy, but it feels like that's
feels like
what's
it,
happening.
yeah. Right, because you may have been told that this is what's going to be hard, and so it becomes hard, right? That
Yeah.
kind of thing. Sure, right. So the kind of situations where kids without, or even adults without ASD would never be assessed on, or maybe if they were, they would behave exactly the same way, but nobody expects them to behave the same way, and so nobody says anything about it. But for autistic kids, everybody expects things to be hard, and so they're noticed as hard because they're hard for everybody else, but they're hard for autistic kids, and that's who we're paying attention to, right? So that's certainly one thing that happens. Why else might somebody say, multilingualism or second language instruction is hard for autistic kids? Why might anybody come up with this?
Could it be?
Go ahead, Mary.
Could it be that to be able to suppress the language when they need to and go and use the other language when they need to, because is there a general where they very focused on one thing?
So the suggestion is, now let's remember what Luz has told us is that multilingualism is fine for autistic kids, and in fact it's better, right? But the question is like, what causes the myth in the first place, right? What's underneath this myth?
Right.
And so one thing that could be underneath this myth is maybe if you're autistic, you have harder time suppressing stimuli, like, because that's what you need to do, right? Like as a bilingual individual. But turns out that's actually the opposite for autistic people, right? They're really good at suppressing. I mean, there's no such thing as the autistic individual, obviously, but one of the functions, one of the characteristics of ASD is that people become really good at ignoring whatever they don't want to pay attention to, right? Can we agree on this? Right. So this is why people talk about fixations and so forth in the clinical term, right? And so, in fact, from the executive function standpoint, like being able to suppress the things that you don't need, which is what you really need to be able to do language, ASD gives you a boost, right? So I'm not saying let's all go get ASD, like that seems like a crazy thing to say more generally because people are people. I'm saying this particular clinical frame actually does not result in problems for language learning, especially additional language learning, right? Because in fact, maybe the opposite is true. So now the question is then why might people say that language learning is hard for them? Well, maybe that's because of everything else that's going on. The scrutiny, maybe all the noise in the room, maybe all the other things that, if your classroom is in the gym, right? There's other things that are going on. There may be bullying, there may be this, there may be that, maybe the other. All right, anybody wants to weigh in on this? Anybody wants to add, comment? Now, did you want to add something? Because you're like waving your hands.
The ASD is commonly like comorbid with language developmental delay. So there might be some influence that people are saying, well, they're delayed in this, or
kind of like
what is it? It's not competence. It's proficiency. Like you can't speak, but you do understand it, so you can't be like.
Yeah, so it's a comprehension versus production. Yeah, so this DLD comorbidity, which is what we were talking about with Manelli, right? Manelli brought this up. She has a student that somebody said DLD, and then they're like, well, this is autism. This could very well be both, right? There's like no reason to suspect that those are either or kind of situations, could very well be both. And so you could be testing one but getting the other. And, and if you keep doing that, right, the kid eventually goes, this is too hard, I don't get it. Well, of course you don't get it because people are doing the wrong thing at you, right?
And then there's already the myth that bilingualism is hard for people with DLD.
Right.
So.
Which in fact there isn't. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that just gets transferred onto ASD because of the comorbidity.
That's right. That's right. So these are kind of the problems, right? So the point here is, as it is true for many individuals of all kinds, for autistic children and adults, certain things are hard. Okay, that is true. And if one of those certain things is language classes, because of the nature of the classes, sure, that will be hard. But it's not the language part. That's the important story. It's not about multilingualism. It's not about adding another language. It's about something else entirely. So, in fact, as it is true for kids with DLD, kids with ASD show increased performance on certain bilingualism tasks, right? So for DLD, it's really you get and dyslexia, you get biliteracy effects and vocabulary boost, and so you do for kids with ASD. That's kind of an important part of the story we want to take out of this conversation, because this myth, before we start disbanding this myth, we've got to think about where it comes from, like what's underneath it, right? So, and much of what's underneath this is people with disabilities can't do complex language stuff, which is, of course, wildly untrue. Comments on this point? Manila, I can hear you thinking.
And it's just kind of academic ableism.
Yes, of course it is. Yes, it's the notion of ableism, which we'll revisit next time we meet. Yeah.
No, I really like this chapter because it's something that I've been wrestling with for years, because it's hard to explain when, some students who may be struggling with acquiring a second language kind of may mimic DLD or some other disorders, and it just mirrors it so much sometimes that it's hard to tell them apart. And just kind of learning more of the science behind it. This is why I'm asking a lot of questions.
Good. That's what it's supposed to be.
I apologize, but it's because
You should.
I really want to learn this.
Yeah, well, that's what should be happening every time.
Yeah, I feel like I come across this all the time. Even like I said, I went to visit in the middle school last week, and there's a student that is like DLD, but I'm like, is it really DLD? I think it's a misdiagnosis. So I'm gonna bring part of this, the DLD that I did, to the teacher so we can discuss this further.
Good. Yeah, excellent. All right, very nice. So, Luz, I'll let you decide what happens next. We have 10 more minutes for the class. I don't know how you want to handle the rest of this, because obviously this discussion.
I mean, if Chelsea is good to do her part, she
Okay.
can share her mini presentation for 5.4, which puts us right at the half, and then we continue 5.5 next week.
Sounds good. All right. Chelsea, do you need to share, or do you share the screen, or you just?
No, I don't have anything to share.
Okay, cool. Well,
I'm gonna apologize. I'm a little sick, so
Uh-oh.
if I start coughing, please forgive me.
Okay. Don't
The article I did was
Don't
from
die. Be careful.
Wahashi and Al in 2012
Okay.
in the research of autism spectrum disorders. And essentially, they were looking at whether bilingual exposed children between the ages of 24 and 52 months who have autism, do they have different experience, or or is their bilingual experience negatively affected by early language development with autism compared to their monolingual peers? So they had 170 something children to choose from. They ended up with 20 children who are bilingual exposed and 40 who were monolingual. And both groups had autism. So just to put it into perspective, all groups were that was like one of their control factors. They looked at 6 key measures: autism-related communication impairment, the age of first words or phrases, receptive language, expressive language, functional communication, and language intervention hours. And I do want to leave with this. They did not use all of the spoken language that was produced in this paper, and this is more of an exploratory paper rather than an experimental one. And so they were just looking at key points and data to further their analysis, and they were sorry, their methods were using univariate ANOVAs and MANOVA for autism-related communication and speech, language, and behavior analysis. Yes. And essentially what they found was, there's no statistical difference on language or communication between either bilingual exposed or monolingual children with autism. They also found that there was a similar age for first words and phrases between both groups. They found also that the language intervention hours were not that different between the two groups, and that receptive, functional, and expressive scores were also the same across the groups. They also found that there are no real delays or hiccups in bilingual exposure to early language development, and that they suggested that restricting bilingual exposure may be unnecessary, and that bilingual exposure does not cause language delays in children with autism. That's about sums it up. They were looking at like the socioeconomic classes of parents and their education. Just giving it another scoot through. Their preschool language, their autism, like the scores for their autism diagnosis. So they were looking at a lot of different things and comparing it to each other.
None of that suggested that bilingualism was a problem.
No.
So this is an important factor, yeah. Because bilingualism was fine for everybody. So yes, thank you very much, Chelsea. So this is an important part to now remember, and we will obviously come back to this discussion. But one thing I want to bring to you, well, I don't know. Does anybody have any questions for Chelsea?
I might have missed it. Was this longitudinal or cross section?
Cross section, right? I think. Chelsea disappeared. I think it was a cross sectional study. Chelsea,
sorry.
Was this longitudinal or cross sectional?
I believe it was cross sectional because they were using ANOVAs.
No, I mean you could use ANOVAs for longitudinals as well, but the question is, did they give a set of things to people at the same age, or did they track them over a period of time, which they did.
Oh, they just gave it at the same time.
Right, so it's cross sectional. Yeah, cross sectional.
Thank you.
Cross sectional. Yeah. So we will return to this conversation. Thank you very much. What I want to bring to your attention in the remaining couple of minutes is, in this study, there was no comparison to kids without ASD. Right? So our typical scenario for like experimental research is you take a group that you want to know about, and then you take a group without that. Right? So if you want to know effects of bilingualism, then you look at bilingual kids and then monolingual kids. Or if you want to know about autistic kids, then you look at autistic kids and non-autistic kids, right? Something like this. It's called control group, right? And so in this study, we do not see a control group that has no diagnosis of autism. In other words, they're not comparing autistic kids to non-autistic kids. They're only looking at what happens inside the group of student or of learners with ASD. And so I want to pose this to you because there's a lot of research now, especially on multilingualism, but particularly on heritage language learning, that reminds us that that's probably a better way to go, more generally. So we will start our conversation next time we meet with or somewhere in the middle of it. I think we'll start our conversation with this. Why should we not compare people with profile X to people without that profile? Like, why are we doing science like this versus that? Right? So that's kind of a conversation I want to start with. And to get you all thinking about this a little bit more, I have given you a link to an article by Henner and Robinson. It's in the syllabus, so take a look at that article, and that is essentially the Manifesto for Crip Linguistics. This is what's become known as, let's think, but it goes well beyond the question of people with disabilities. It has something to do with how you group folks when you study them. So I want to have this conversation with you when we get together.
What's the question again? You said, why should we not compare?
Right, like people with the thing against the people without the thing, right? So bilinguals.
With the thing.
Right, so bilinguals.
With the disability?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Disability, second language, like it doesn't matter what it is, right? So typically we're like, oh, we want to study L2 effects. Let's compare these people to monolinguals, or right? If we're going to study autism effects, let's compare these people to people without autism, right? So, but now this study that Chelsea has brought to our attention, and several other works out there suggesting that that's not the way to go. So the question is why and how we think about that kind of data collection. Okay. All right, so if you were running a little behind and didn't see the conversation about the assignment, you're welcome to stick around and I'll tell you more about that. The rest of you, it's lovely seeing everybody, and I will talk to you all next week. Maybe, if nothing else, please watch for an announcement because, like I said, I have some complicated schedule situation next week. All right? Okay, very nice. Good to see everybody. Say hi to the baby. We love the baby. The baby is a part of the class. All right, so Mary and Nadia, of course, you're welcome to either stay or go. Nadia and Mary, I had posted a new assignment that's due on the 22nd, and that would be, and everybody else is welcome to either stay or go. If you, or maybe Chelsea, were you late? Maybe not. No, Chelsea was not late. So
I probably missed it too. So assignment on the 22nd?
Yes. So you had missed it because you were late. So you might want to take a look at that assignment, and if you have any questions about it, as you know, I am here for your answers. All right? All good?
Okay.
Excellent.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right. Let's get out. Okay. All right, let's do this.
You've